Hey everyone, welcome to today's video explainer session where we're going to talk about Immuta Projects. So an Immuta project is essentially a logical grouping of data sets that allow you to associate a purpose or a user's intent when accessing data. This allows you to collaborate securely on data sets and do some advanced things like allowing mass joins while ensuring that people agree to data terms or data use agreements when operating under the specific context. And so let's jump right in. So the first thing I want to show you is an actual example data set we're going to walk through. This is a credit card transactions data set. It exists in Databricks, Snowflake, and Starburst, and we're going to walk through an Immuta project to see how you can use that to help protect data in your organization. And so the first thing I want to show is the policies that I currently have enabled inside of Immuta. So we have a mass credit card policy and a show approved location policy. Essentially, these policies are going to prevent people from accessing sensitive data and also filter out data based on the location in which a user resides. And so the first thing I've done is I've actually turned these policies on. So if we go back into Databricks and take a look, you'll see that we actually get a mass credit card number now, and my users are going to be seeing specific country codes they have authorization to see. And so if I went over to Snowflake just to show consistency, you can see again we have the same type of table here, and we're applying the policies in the exact same way. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to build this policy that says, and this is the default behavior for all of the data sets unless I'm operating under something called a purpose inside of Immuta. And so let's go back into Immuta now and dive into a project. So here's an example fraud detection project, and this is where the logical grouping of data sets happen. And so you can think of projects as a way to collaborate for a specific reason. And what this means is that you can set up a purpose that says what the actual use for the data in this context is. In this case, I've just defined something generic, but you can provide these out of your own environment. You can write them yourself. And we also have some example policies around HIPAA and CCPA you could also utilize. Now, the nice thing here is you can actually nest policies or nest purposes in projects. So you could have multiple things you could use this for. Users have to agree to each one of these purposes that I just showed you down here. But now we can actually define what types of data sources users should access when they're operating under this context. So in this specific example, my users have access to quite a few different tables inside of their environments. But when they operate under this specific context, you'll see they actually get access revoked, except for the explicit 4 tables I have here. And so you can see I have Databricks, S3, Snowflake, and then a Starburst table. And so what this is going to look like for an end user now is if I'm operating in a specific context, what I can do is I can add users to this project. And so I'm actually going to go in here and add a specific user. So let's go ahead and add a member. And you can add this member by attributes. You could add them by a group membership. In this case, I'm just going to go add my other user to this, and you could set an expiration here as well. And this would be a time-based expiration, so you could automatically have users removed from this project context after a certain duration. In this case, I'm just going to say this user subscribed, add them, and then we're going to walk through the workflow to see what that actually looks like. And now I'm logged in as my other user I just added to the project. And if I look here, you'll see the user gets a notification I've been added to a specific project. And then here is that purpose that you saw me set on the project earlier. And now my user can agree or deny this attestation statement. And so now that I've agreed to it, my user's able to switch into this particular context. And so what that means now is if you look in the little drop down here, they can actually change context into these different projects. And now behind the scenes, what's going to happen for the user is that my user will now be able to log in to these different platforms and see only the tables that are listed inside of their project. And so if I log in as my user here, we just logged in, that we just added to the project, you'll see that this user is actually going to be able to run queries inside of Databricks, but that data that's going to show up now is going to be based on that particular project. So here's an example before Immuta I was in the project. If I switch now and ask Databricks to show me the specific tables I have access to, you'll notice they lose access to everything except for that credit card transaction table. So now that that user is in the project, they've lost access to those other 2 tables. They're only able to query the credit card information. And if they run a query here, you'll see again, they're getting the mass credit card number, but they're seeing all the country codes in the different data set because again, we're operating under this context where now they're allowed to see all the country codes in the data, but they're still not able to see the unmasked credit card number. Now, if I switch over as another user that's in finance, I'd actually set this rule to say mask the credit card unless I'm detecting fraud and I'm in finance. So my user who's in finance can actually go in and I'll show you how we do this through the Databricks UI, is that I can actually go in here and tell Immuta, hey, I want to operate under this fraud detection project. And now when I rerun my queries, you'll see that this user actually gets access to that credit card number. Again, this is just to demonstrate how you can use the exclusion rule. But my user can go back inside of Databricks now, rerun their query, and because I'm in finance and I'm operating under this specific context, you'll see that the credit card number is actually unmasked now. And if I go into Databricks and Snowflake just to show consistency, again, that same exclusion rule is going to apply across the different platforms. So even though I change the context in Databricks, it's going to transparently apply that across any of the different platforms. And again, if I show you an example in Redshift that's registered through Starburst, we get the same consistent policy, right? And then Immuta obviously is going to audit log this. So in our app logs, we can actually see that my user switched their context into a fraud detection project. And then we get all the subsequent queries that were run under this context. So again, you can prove compliance for specific regulated industries while allowing your users to collaborate in a secure manner. Now, there's a couple other things in projects that I haven't talked about yet that are options just to be aware of. So we also allow this capability called mass joins, where you can imagine if I'm masking a credit card number, I may need to join across different platforms that have the same credit card. And by default, Immuta is going to use randomized salts with the hashing algorithm we use. In this particular context, if you switch into a project, we'll actually allow you to use the same salts. So when we do joins on mass columns, you'll actually be able to use that key knowing that referential integrity is going to be there because the same salt is being applied. And then the other thing we also have inside of projects is something called equalization. So you can imagine in a situation like this, I have users that might have different various access controls, right? Maybe someone has access to the US and Canada. My other user might only have access to the US. If you're working on a secure project or a sensitive data project, you would not want the user who has access to the US and Canada to accidentally send data to the user who only has access to the US. So project equalization will basically be a Venn diagram of privileges, enforcing a rule that says the user who normally can see US and Canada can actually only see US data in this project because someone else in the project has a less access than they do. So it would actually take the lowest level access someone has and apply it consistently across the project. And then the last thing we have in projects is something called a native workspace, where we can actually control write-backs under this specific context to specific platforms inside of like Snowflake and Databricks. And so that's a quick high level of projects. For more information, check out the description of the video. There'll be a little bit more content I put out here to help you get started with this. Feel free to leave some comments or check out our website, immuta.com, if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.